What's up, loves? Glad you're joining me for part two. I'm still getting boozy over here. I hope you are too. If you are, cheers. Don't forget to consume responsibly. We are diving into the next part of my Cinco de Mayo series where we explore a little bit more about the history of tequila and how it's made, where it's coming from, all those good things. So I'm sure you've already checked out video number one. If you haven't, make sure to go back and watch that. And if so, let's go ahead and dive into video number two, where we're going to discuss some of the history of my favorite drink, and hopefully yours too. I needed that sip. Okay. So, basically, tequila goes back almost 1,000 BC, like circa 1,000 years BC, where they found like cave paintings or wall art, whatever you want to call it, by the Olmecs about this drink that they were making that appears to have derived from the agave plant. And as we talked about in video number one, agave is exactly how you get tequila. So you've got that reference right there, but you don't really see too much more about it until like 200 AD when we're talking about the Aztecs, because thank God, even though colonialism came in and did its thing and tried to, decimate the history as it does, we still retained a lot of information about our friends, the Aztecs, about the indigenous people who were here before us. And so we know that they were drinking a beverage called pulque. And they even had a god and goddess of pulque. And we know that pulque was basically their way of fermenting the agave plant. And usually it was drank at like ceremonial types of things. So maybe a giant celebration or when they were worshiping this god or goddess. And that is where you would see this typically consumed. So pulque was the version that you have for the Aztecs. But that's definitely not what we're drinking today. And it probably had a bit of a different fermentation process as well. What we are drinking today as tequila actually came along because of, well, unfortunately, and yet, of course, colonialism. And I say unfortunately and yet of course because, as we know, colonialism is one of the most unfortunate things to happen to any peoples in the modern day society, and yet still colonialism is baked into every single facet of American history. There's no way to get around it. We got invaded, they dragged us from different lands, all types of bad things happened, but we're here. We're thriving. We're cool. So colonialism happened. The Spaniards popped up around 14 to 1500 BC. You've got your conquistadors, you've got your Cortezes of the world, and they are traveling here in this new land. Now, what some of you may already be aware of, but some people may not, is that back in the day when they used to come over from, England and Spain, etc., they had to travel with liquor. They actually traveled with beer and like brandy and rum. And that wasn't just because everybody was drunks. It was because beer actually was something that could help you sustain when you were on long voyages. Water would become stagnant and it could actually become dangerous to drink. And beer, as they had it back then, their means, was not exactly the same strength as the beer that we drink today. It was a lot more watered down. The process of making it was different. And so beer was a way of having a water-like beverage that you could carry with you on long journeys, and you could be hydrated without having to worry about running out of your supply midway. Rum, brandy, bourbon, things like that were carried because, of course, they realized that the alcoholic properties were able to sanitize in a situation where maybe you had to like sew somebody up real quick. And also sometimes you just need a little bit of liquid courage, or you needed to warm that belly, and you would get a shot of rum, you would get a little bit of brandy. So it was medicinal as well as it also was a comfort. Long story short, your Spaniards are over here. They're in South America. They're doing their little, we're going to explore, we're going to conquer, we're going to take over thing. And they start running out of the liquor. The rum's gone. Where is the rum? Where's the brandy? Where is it? It's nowhere to be found. And that's a problem, as you well know, because even in a pandemic, we do not shut down the liquor stores. So what do? Well, they do what everybody does when necessity comes along. They get inventive. And they see this agave plant that these Aztec people, these indigenous people are already like fermenting. And they go, well, we can do that. And so they did. Except they decided to mix it with mud and make it a fermentation process that way, which actually gives birth to mezcal, which we talked about in the first video, which is the close sister of tequila, actually the big sister of tequila, because mezcal, she came along first. So you get in the 14 to 1500s the advent of mezcal from the Spaniards. And from there, of course, we know that the Spaniards did not just pick up and leave, that instead they set up shop. They did what a lot of different European nations were doing. They colonized the place. They brought over more of their people. They intermingled with the people that were already here. They had bebes. They had families. And as you do, once you really start to establish yourself, you set up land. You start to grow. You start to get your agriculture going. People start to farm. Businesses start to grow. And you start to create what is now a country. And that's exactly what happened. So we shoot up a couple hundred years to 1758. And at that time, you have, and this might sound familiar to you guys, the Cuervo familia popping onto the scene. And the Cuervo familia is doing what probably a lot of other people have been doing at the time, just a little bit on a bigger scale. They've got this farmland. They've been cultivating this agave plant, and now they pop up as the first family distillery. They say, you know, why should we just watch our North American brothers come out with bourbons and come out with your Jack Daniels Tennessee whiskeys, and we have something that's native to our land too. We want to have some pride in it. We want to go ahead and have some money. So we're going to take and make some commerce out of a natural plant that we have growing here. And they do. They take that agave and they make their own family distillery. They have their own farmland, so they have a lock on it. And of course, in between that time, a lot of other families were doing the same thing. Now, just like with any alcohol or any other, you know, food or something like that, people are also experimenting. What's the best way to distill this? What's the best plant that you can use? What is the best process altogether? And it's important that people experiment, and it's important that people keep asking these questions, because next in 1873, you get the Soaza familia. And the Soaza familia pops on the scene, and they make their family distillery, not unlike the Cuervo family. But the distinct difference is that the Soaza familia is credited with first identifying blue agave, or agave tequilana, as the proper plant to be using when you're distilling tequila. So the tequila that we're used to drinking on the shelves today is distilled from blue agave. That's the now process that they have. So, you know, the Cuervo family comes along. They perfected the distilling process. They perfected the thought process of, you know, buying land and only growing this plant for this revenue. And the Soaza family comes along and they perfect it. They go, hey, we was playing around with some of those plants, and come to find out it's the blue agave that makes the difference. And they go ahead and they perfect that recipe, and now we've got tequila. So we go from a more rustic drink, you know, probably starting around 1000 BC, coming up to 200 BC, 200 AD, that's being drank by the Aztecs, the pulque. And eventually, after, you know, some conquering, some unfortunate encounters that ended up being a little bit more fortunate than we thought with the Spaniards and colonization, we end up with the Soaza family, like I said, in 1873, actually perfecting that blue agave distillation process. So that is the history of tequila, and that's also the history of tequila as we know it today. I hope that this information was really helpful, and I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're drinking along with me, please do so responsibly. Cheers.